March 21, 2023. This is the S&P 500 E-Futures Mini on the Thinkorswim platform, 2000 tick chart. Don't watch this entire video because I have a tendency to ramble. Just go down to the bottom where the descriptions are. You can see where I took my trades as well as where I saw specific, maybe a setup, maybe not a setup. So you can use my video mainly just to compare against if you thought you saw something and you weren't sure. So this is how the chart looked like today. There were really no news catalysts or economic data to cause any weird spikes. It was kind of like a rally in the pre-market. Then it went through a very long consolidation phase followed by another rally. So this is how I drew up my charts and where I took my trades. So you can see in the pre-market rallied, had this long consolidation, another rally. So I took a total of 6 trades today. I ended up losing on 3 and winning on 3. So I actually lost on this first one. The second one I also lost, and then I actually got green on this one. And then on the 4th trade, I ended up losing again. And then these last 2 trades, I ended up green. So certainly I think I probably got a little bit too anxious and overtraded. In terms of setups, I only saw a few setups kind of toward the beginning. I didn't really see too many good clean setups in the middle of the consolidation. And then I also saw a few more setups. Well, I saw setups kind of toward the end of the day. So I want to point out that tomorrow is the FOMC meeting. Everybody expects a 25 point basis rate hike. And also Fed Powell comes out and speaks. So during those times, it's probably going to be pretty volatile. It'll happen around 11 o'clock Pacific Standard when the rate comes out and it'll be officially provided. And then Powell will come out at around 11:30 Pacific Standard Time and provide some color. Usually when he talks, it causes the market to oscillate a lot more than when the numbers are released. But when the numbers are released, the market does whipsaw kind of crazy. So if you're going to trade tomorrow, just be careful. So the pre-market, I don't trade the pre-market, so there are some setups in here, but I also noticed that the volatility today, well, actually the volume was a lot lower. So it was just kind of a choppy day. And in terms of candlesticks, it wasn't quite that many. And what I mean is if you had a minute candle, then you're going to see a lot more candlesticks because every minute's going to print. But as you can see, like from 8 o'clock to about 9 o'clock, it was choppy, but overall there wasn't as much price action. So it made it a little bit tougher for me to find good trades, good safe trades that I felt comfortable with. So there was consolidation in the pre-market. I did have this trend channel going up. It broke out and it looked like kind of consolidated for a while. And this is where I saw my first setup as well as my first trade. Now you could argue like this is a double top. You could say this is first entry long, second entry long. The reason I don't like taking these little micro movements is because the scalp is going to be, if you're going to take 1 point, you might get it, but you might not. But when the candles are already this tiny and this consolidated, even getting a 1 point scalp could be risky based upon how big your stop loss is. So I kind of don't like trading when candles are like this, really, really choppy and consolidating and just making, they're pretty much side by side. So going back, this is what I first saw. I saw a new high here. I saw first entry long because it didn't quite break above this guy. Comes down. Technically, it makes a second entry long right there. And then I saw a potential failure. So I saw a second entry long failure. And at the time, actually, this was a little bit higher. So I was selling into the low, which isn't recommended, but I didn't think about that at the time because I thought this was a pretty good signal bar. It's very, very bearish. And I took the trigger, I took the bar after this trigger because when I saw this, I said, okay, well, it's right at the EMA. It's also right at this low point. Next candle is kind of a doji. So these could technically both be dojis, but I thought this might be worthwhile. And I saw this as a pretty small 2-point risk because it's at 40.2275 and the low is at 40.2075. So I saw a 2-point risk. So I actually just went ahead and entered. Ends up being a bad trade or losing trade. It's right here I'm looking, and then it stops me out right here because my stop was right above. Actually, I think I had it a little bit above right here, and I got stopped out. I should have considered that potentially, since the EMA is flattening, and this is at the low, instead of seeing a failed second entry, because right here it does fail as a second entry long, it comes back up and flashes through. But seeing this, I probably should have paused a bit and been a little more cautious. So ends up being my first trade that loses. Prices move up, breaks out, comes back in. So this is a big overshoot and it's coming back through. I'm sitting on my hands, and this is where I see the second trade. So I see a new high, see a first entry long, comes down, and then right here makes a second entry long. But I didn't take the second entry long because it's pretty far from the EMA. It's a big overshoot. I don't know if it's going to continue moving out or is it going to break back into this trading range. So, but I do see this failure of the second entry long. Now, this isn't really that clean a setup because it's kind of far from the EMA to decide to take a short. And the count, I guess the count I would say isn't a safe count because even though this is technically a first entry, second entry, so you do have a second entry long, you can consider this as one big leg. So you could actually just say this is all the way down. This is actually a first entry long. So to even consider a failure on the second entry is, I guess, what I would consider not a safe count. And even though it broke out of this trend channel, it's probably going to try to go back and make another extreme. So all this is kind of an afterthought because in the meantime, I was thinking, okay, I kind of wanted to recover this, and I thought that this was going to continue breaking down lower because in the regular trading hours, this is a new low. But there was no reason for me to think any of that, or no valid reason. It doesn't really follow price action rules. So as a result, I take a short here, and I get flashed and I get taken out here. So I put my entry down here, and I get filled, and then on this candle, it takes me out. Because I thought, okay, it might go down as another potential move down. But, there's potential that could just move up. So this could be a first entry long right here. First entry long. And then this is potentially the second entry long. But I didn't see that. I counted these, which is not what I call a safe count or an accurate count. But here I do see a new low, first entry short, second entry short. I saw this, but I thought it might be a possible trade because it's certainly better than this bogus failed second entry long. It has a pretty decent signal bar, and it is with trend right now because it is going down. And it looked like it made us two legs up. So this has a little more going for it than this. But since I just took this red trade, I didn't want to take a risk. And also on top of that, it's another key entry point. If you drew it like I did, it's kind of at the top of the trading range. But it closed a little bit low. I mean, if it was a little bit higher, it would have been nicer. So I don't know what would have happened if it did close higher. Maybe I would have taken the trade, maybe I wouldn't. But I'm probably taking a little cautious approach after I saw that. Also at this point, I did draw this guy slightly lower to about right there to try to capture this touch and have just a smaller overshoot. And then when I do draw this like so, then it kind of helps reinforce that this was not a good trade because I am selling right into the low of this trading range. Prices continue moving. I do see a lower high here because the first entry short, second entry short, this is a lower high. Now this is what I actually did try to take a trade on because I saw it come up. I didn't try to take it here. I did try to enter on this guy because once it broke below, I was jumping around. I thought toward the close, before it closed way down here, I said, this is probably going to work. So I tried to enter one tick below, hoping that it'd come back up and maybe leave a little bit of a wick, but it didn't. It ended up closing here. And my decision was late. Well, I don't know if it was late, but it was more conservative and cautious because when I saw this going down, I said, okay, definitely it has made a lower high when it was dancing down here. Then when it broke below this guy, I said, okay, I want to enter this trade. But at that time, price action was chopping around. And right before it closed, I dropped my entry right here, hoping that it'd come back and get me, or at least the next candle would come up and get me, but it didn't. So I ended up missing that trade. So that's okay. I didn't get filled, but that's all right. Prices continue moving. Right here, it's like getting pretty choppy. These candles are pretty much side by side now. I don't take any more entries right now. I'm just watching. It comes up and I draw this to touch twice, 1, 2, and I also touched 1, 2 here. Thought, okay, if I get a third one, then I'll feel very confident about this potentially being a good trading channel. It breaks out, and this is where I see a potential second entry short. So when I saw this, I saw a new low, first entry short, second entry short. I also saw a measured move. I saw one clean leg up, a pullback, another very clean leg up. Now this is like a in the middle of the road candle because it is a bullish candle, but it closed, excuse me, it's a bearish candle, but it closed bullish, but there's only like one tick above. So I thought this is a worthwhile trade to at least come back for scalp to touch this because it just broke out of this trading range, excuse me, trend channel, and might come back in and, come back down. So I took a risk on this one, ends up working. Prices continue moving down. So this is like my first green trade out of 3. So I already lost 2 and I, made 1. Prices continue moving down. I wasn't sure what was happening. I do draw this trading range, but it's actually lower. Where my cursor is, I actually cut it through these guys right here, this horizontal, and I actually had it cutting through the bottom right here. And this was considered a small little overshoot. As a failed breakout, comes back in, chops around. I mean, this is just like a lot of congestion right here. I did see this as a potential new low first entry short, and I was looking for a second entry short. Now, if you were looking at a smaller time frame, you could say this is a first entry short, and then this is potentially second entry short. But to take this, I don't know, you're getting close to the lows, and my trend line, which would have been right here, I guess I'll just go ahead and draw it. The trend line, I actually just kind of had something like right here at the time before I evolved it up to be a bigger one. So I looked at it, so I zoomed out too far. Okay, so it was pretty choppy, as I said. Let me clean this up, actually. Let me just get rid of that. This is getting a little confusing for me. So I took this trade. Let's zoom in this way. Apologize. Took this trade. That was my green trade. It got congested here. My trend channel with trading range, excuse me, is down here. It's chopping. Started moving up. I tried to fit a trend channel here. I noticed it hit the top of this, or it kind of came up here and it breached the top of my trading range here. And I decided, okay, well, there's a small little consolidation area here. It's a new high, first entry long, potentially a second entry long, but I didn't like the candle here at the time. So I skipped it. Prices continue moving. Now, I didn't really see any good cleanups clean setups. And there is kind of like, you could consider this kind of, it didn't really make a new high, but in this case, it could be a localized new high, first entry long, but then it creates a second entry long way down here, which I didn't really quite like. Prices continue moving down. So if I didn't mention it before, my bottom of my trading range was here. I ended up dragging it a little bit lower here because I saw it touch here. And then when it was down here, I didn't like this overshoot going so much, dwelling so far out that I dragged it up here. So this is kind of where I established my trading range pretty much at this time of day. The prices continue moving. It goes up. I don't see any clean setups. It's just like very, very choppy. Makes a new high, first entry long. I do see a second entry long here, but I don't like this candle. It's not a good signal bar. Prices continue moving again. I see this potentially as a measured move, this guy, this yellow one, and then I drew it and I placed it here. When I saw it kind of touch the top, I was thinking, did I potentially miss a setup, or at least went back and reviewed, and I thought, okay, there's a first entry short, second entry short right here, and you could restart the count here. Maybe this is like when it ends, use new short, use first entry short, and then potentially a second entry short. But kind of looking at that, I wasn't confident in my read of the price action, but I do know it kind of made a measured move here, and even though it flashed out, I don't know that I'm keen enough and savvy enough to see that there's maybe a trade there. Prices continue moving, bounced off the top of this trading range, comes down. It looked like it was consolidating down here because I drew this channel, but it didn't fit very well. It had an overshoot. Looks like it came back in. And I was expecting another move breakout here, but there was no setup that I saw that was safe to take. Breaks out, it touches the top of this now, and I'm wondering if this is the true top of the trading range. Is it going to pull back again? And just keep in mind that this is already 11:30, and my last trade was around 8 o'clock or 7:50-ish. And so there's a lot of just sitting around because these candles took a while to close because it's just a low volatility day. Volume was also pretty low. Now, what I did take is here. Now, I looked at this and I don't think it was actually a good trade. It ended up being a it ended up being a red trade. And here's what happened. So I saw this as a new low. Technically, this is the lowest, and it'd be a first entry, a second entry, but I counted this as a new low. So I said, okay, just one big grouping, the new low, first entry short comes up, and I saw a second entry short, potentially about to form. So instead of thinking of potential second entry short, I said it's probably going to continue its bullish trend to potentially make this measure move up. But there was no real strong indication of any of that happening. So I saw, okay, there's probably a failed second entry short coming. Again, this isn't a good idea because it's not really based off anything. This is me reading or trying to force what I think is going to happen into the trade. So I went ahead and entered. And so I said, okay, cool. I just got filled. What happened is this candle takes me out because I entered here, right about here, fills me, doesn't make a scalp or anything because it only moved about 1 or 2 ticks down up, and then it comes down and takes me out. And for good reason, because this didn't even form a clean second entry until here. And there's no reason to believe it's a failed second entry when there is no second entry. So I took a red on that. Then I saw this. I go, okay, for sure, if I counted this as a new low, first entry short, second entry short, this is setting up to potentially be a failed second entry short. Now, again, I think this is pretty aggressive because I do have a trend channel going up here, and it didn't even touch the EMA. But I think I was reacting too emotional because this is happening at 11:46, and then I took this trade at around 11:52. So I was just like sitting, waiting, kind of thinking that it's going up. My original idea was correct, so I took an entry right above this guy. It ends up working, and it kind of goes up and touches, and I was able to get a small runner out of this. But again, this isn't the best setup because this is touching the bottom here. And I was thinking, okay, even though it's touching the bottom and I saw this as the top of the trading range that I established early on because I wanted to cut through here and it kind of had an overshoot, there isn't really clear indication that this is good enough to be a second key entry point. Now, if the EMA had actually come up and helped reinforce it, let's say the EMA came up to here, then I could consider maybe 2.5 key entry points because this one is still a little iffy, this horizontal blue line. And even then, this one had only confirmed twice and then maybe a third time here. So taking this trade definitely was aggressive and also, I would say, kind of risky. I just wanted this to actually come down and touch, but I ended up taking it, which is I need to kind of be more patient when I see things like that because this easily could have not worked or kind of come down and touched the EMA finally. So this was early and it ended up working, but there was kind of just back of my mind thinking I need to be careful not doing that. So then I saw, okay, if this is the end of the second entry short and it failed, I saw, okay, new low, new localized low, first entry short, second entry short, and then a failure. So I took another entry right here, ends up moving up and working. I don't get a runner, but I did just take profits off pretty quickly. Now, this is like not the best signal bar because even though this is a second entry short right here, right when it formed, this signal bar just barely made it up. And plus, I'm pushing to the top of this localized high. On top of that, the measure move is coming potentially into play because the measure move that when I saw one leg up, which is this big yellow one, I saw, okay, potentially one leg up, pulls back, a second leg up. Now, my measured move count might not be correct, but in any case, I did know that this was sitting there existing. So when this broke above and I took the trade, it certainly was very risky. And I think definitely in hindsight, since it was a risky trade, it wasn't quite the best setup. I should have skipped it because it's too far from the EMA. There could have been a chance where it just wanted to pull back and correct to the EMA, which would have taken me out. So that was my last trade. At this point, I am green for the day because these two risky trades kind of washed out as well as this third trade over here. So I had 1 red, 2 red, 3 red. This one helped recover some of the losses here, and then these two definitely recovered all the losses, the remaining, and gave me a little bit of profit. I knew I was not being disciplined now, and I said, okay, I'm not going to take any more trades. It is toward the end of the day. I'm seeing things that aren't there. I'm forcing things that aren't there, and the market in its way had rewarded me. And I definitely don't want to build that into a bad habit because I've already kind of fallen prey to it twice, and also in my earlier trading in previous days. So I said, okay, you know what? I just need to walk away. I'm pretty much okay. I didn't lose any, and I'm just a little ahead, so I should just leave it alone. So I just kind of ended up watching the rest of the market, and I did just mark this trade because I did see a double top, a new high, first entry long, second entry long. I don't like this as a signal bar, even though it's bouncing right off the EMA, and it touched the EMA once already, broke through, closed below, and then went back up. So that made me a little bit more wary. Now, I for sure wasn't going to take this trade no matter what. But if this had set up earlier in the day, I'm not sure if I would have taken the trade or not, just because the context, depending on what it was earlier, which is saying that it's kind of bullish now. I don't know if I would have taken it. Maybe if I hadn't taken a trade yet or I was up for the day, I might have risked it because it is a small candle. So the risk was, for the most part, pretty, I would say, like small because it's only about 6 ticks. And it ends up working. But of course, you don't know that at the time, and then it just kind of goes into the close. So those are my 6 trades, how I saw the markets today. Definitely, I wouldn't say I went on tilt, but I did get sloppy with my trading. So I'll have to reassess, probably watch other people's YouTube videos on how they traded, and then just log and journal this. So hopefully this was helpful.